2014 Formula 1 season look like if Mercedes were not there? The Albert Park circuit in Melbourne, Australia plays host to the first race of the season and the first race of this new turbo hybrid era, and it's a brilliant start for brand new Red Bull driver Daniel Ricciardo, newly promoted up to the Red Bull senior team. He nabs pole position in front of his home crowd, and things go rather well for him on Sunday as he does manage to take the race win. However, you may recall he got disqualified from that race. And he still does. Talk about being in Spain without the S. Daniel Ricciardo would be disqualified from the race win, which means that a McLaren 2-3 would become a McLaren 1-2, and it would be Kevin Magnussen, the rookie, in his first ever race in Formula 1, not only scoring a podium, but getting a race victory ahead of his world champion teammate Jenson Button, and then Fernando Alonso for Ferrari rounds off the podium. But geez, yeah, talk about pain for Daniel Ricciardo. Disqualified from the race win. That would suck so badly. For round 2, we head a little bit further north to Malaysia for the Malaysian Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel, the reigning world champion, he did not have a very good start to his season with a retirement in the first race, but he bounces back with pole position for the second race in Malaysia, and the pole position becomes a race victory. The German driver getting off the ground in terms of points on the table, ahead of his former championship rival Fernando Alonso, finishing up in second place, and then Nico Hülkenberg, he finished 5th in the opening race of the season, he's finishing 3rd in the second. He nabs the podium here as his teammate fails to start the race. For the third round of the season is a hop cross to the Middle East for the Bahrain Grand Prix. Daniel Ricciardo didn't have a very good afternoon in Malaysia after retiring from the race, but he also had an unsafe pit release, which would result in a 10th place grid penalty for the Bahrain Grand Prix, and that would end up being rather painful as he would find himself going quickest in qualifying to take pole position, ignoring the penalty, but he has the penalty, so that hands pole position the way of Williams driver Valtteri Bottas. That doesn't even turn into a podium for him, he finishes doing in P6. It actually ends up being Sergio Perez taking the race victory for Force India. We wouldn't have an amazing battle between the Mercedes, and if I recall correctly, then there was quite a bit of a scrap going on between the Force Indias and the Williamses. But Perez would come out on top in that battle, ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, who would manage to recover to finally get some points on the board, and his first ever podium finish in Formula 1 would be second place here in Bahrain this evening. And then it would be Nico Hülkenberg making it a Force India 1-3. Force India having quite a strong start to this season, it must be said. The circus now backtracks back east to China for the Chinese Grand Prix. Why Bahrain and China weren't the other way around, I'm gonna be honest, not entirely sure on that one, but regardless. Daniel Ricciardo went quickest in qualifying for pole in Bahrain before it got taken away. He would not lose it this time, as he would be quickest in qualifying and would start from that P1 quickest spot for the Grand Prix. He takes pole position for this race, but it's not a race win for him. It's a P2 finish for the Australian driver, once again finishing in second place, this time behind Fernando Alonso. Ferrari actually managing to get a win in 2014 in this universe where you take Mercedes out of it. He takes the race victory, his first race win since Spain the previous year, ahead of the aforementioned Ricciardo, and then Sebastian Vettel gets his second podium of the season to make it a Red Bull 2-3 finish. Round 5 is finally off to start the European season in Barcelona for the Spanish Grand Prix, aka the round that I'm gonna call Daniel's Revenge, as he takes pole position for the Grand Prix, and the pole position turns into his first race victory in Formula 1. He claims the race victory ahead of his teammate Sebastian Vettel, making it a Red Bull 1-2 finish, and Vettel scores the fastest lap as well, but not like he get points for that. It's a Red Bull 1-2 ahead of Valtteri Bottas, taking his first podium in Formula 1. So we're 5 rounds deep into the championship. Let's see how the standings are shaping up at the moment. Fernando Alonso, after a rather consistent start to the season, is currently leading the way on 76 points. He's only 6 points ahead of Sebastian Vettel in second place. The reigning champion is up there at the moment in the championship fight, but it's still early stages. He is 9 points ahead of his teammate, who rounds off the top 3, Daniel Ricciardo, on 61 points. In 4th place, you'll find Nico Hülkenberg for Force India, the German having a very strong start to this season. He's on 56 points, only 3 points ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who rounds off the top 5 on 53 points. 6th place is Sergio Perez on 39 points, while 7th is going the way of Jenson Button for McLaren on 34 points. He's 2 points ahead of his teammate Kevin Magnussen, the person who won the opening race of the season. He's on 32 points, 1 ahead of Kimi Raikkonen in the other Ferrari car on 31 points. While rounding off the top 10, you will find Felipe Massa on 20 points. In the Constructors' Championship, it's a little bit more spread out in this early stage. Red Bull currently comfortably lead the way on 131 points, with Ferrari sitting in second, about just under 30 points back from them, about 24 points back from them on 107, while they are themselves 12 points ahead of Force India. Again, as I said, strong start to the season. They're in third on 95 points. Williams are in fourth place on 73 points, while the top 5 is being rounded off by the McLaren boys on 66 points. Well, it's a bit of a gap back to the rest of the grid, with Toro Rosso sitting in 6th on 21 points. Lotus are in 7th on 11 points, which is basically just the points that Grosjean has right now, because Maldonado has not scored a damn thing yet. And then we have Sauber and 8th, are currently the last ones to have scored a point right now. They're on 1 point, while Marussia and Caterham are yet to get off the ground. The crown jewel of the calendar is coming up next for round 6, the Monaco Grand Prix. The streets of Monte Carlo play host to a race, and Daniel Ricciardo, Red Bull go quite well around here historically. It's a track that they seem to quite like, and they do quite like it this afternoon. Daniel Ricciardo, he's backing up his pole and win from Barcelona with a pole and win in Monaco. He's making it 2 race victories in a row ahead of Fernando Alonso, finishing in 2nd place, keeping up his consistency of being relatively up there. You know, he's only had 1 race where he wasn't in the top 5, and he's continuing that here. And Nico Hulkenberg returned to the podium to finish up in 3rd place, but the real celebrations would be further down the grid at Marussia and Caterham, because Caterham end up scoring points with Marcus Ericsson finishing up in 9th place this afternoon, and Jules Bianchi would finish up in 7th place after that 5-second penalty comes into effect. P6 pre-penalty, P7 post-penalty. Those 2 teams finally score their first points in Formula 1. It's all celebration further down the grid. It's a trip a few thousand miles west now for the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal, Canada. Sebastian Vettel absolutely loves this circuit. I'm pretty sure I've said that about Canada in one of these before, but it's true. He loves this circuit, and he goes quite well here. He goes quite well this time as well, taking pole position for this Grand Prix. Doesn't end up in a race win. That was, of course, Daniel Ricciardo, who took the race win here in real life, and he still does here. It's 3 wins on the bounce for Daniel Ricciardo. He's really got some good consistency, you know. He had some difficulties at the start of the season, but now he's really been just consistently on the podium since Bahrain. Every race, 5 podiums in a row for him now, but Sebastian Vettel does finishing in 2nd place behind his teammate for a Red Bull 1-2, and Jenson Button returns to the podium for the first time since the opening race of the season, finishing up in 3rd place. But yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, 3 wins on the mounts, our first repeat winner of the season after we had 5 different winners in the first 5 races. Well, on track 4 different winners in the first 5, but what does this season think it is? 2012? For the first time in quite a few years, then Formula 1 returns to Austria for the Austrian Grand Prix up next, and this was the only race in 2014 where Mercedes was not on pole. It was Felipe Massa who got pole, and it's still Felipe Massa who gets pole. That ends up being P2 for him on race day, however, as he is to see his teammate Valtteri Bottas getting his first race victory in Formula 1, a track that he does tend to go kind of okay around. Valtteri Bottas did win in Austria quite a bit, you know, and he's taken his first win there this afternoon for a Williams 1-2 with his teammate in 2nd, and then Fernando Alonso, he's consistently up there. He's still consistently up there. He's finishing in P3. Oh, and further down the grid, Pastor Maldonado has finally freaking scored a point. I mean, Romain Grosjean is still freaking carrying the team on his back, but at least Maldonado scores something. One of the classics is coming up next, Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel finds himself going quickest in qualifying for this Grand Prix. However, the points come on Sunday. And when it comes to Sunday, he isn't even on the podium. He ends up falling backwards to P4, but he does score the fastest lap of the race, so I suppose that's something. The race win ends up going the way of Valtteri Bottas, actually. 2 wins on the bounce for him, as it's Daniel Ricciardo returning to the podium after not finishing on the podium in all 3. He finished in P6. He's back on the podium with 2nd place here, and in 3rd place, Jenson Button finally gets a home race podium. In real life, he never stood on the podium at his home race, except for, I believe, 2017, when he was doing interviews on the podium or something after he'd already retired, but while he was racing he never scored a podium in Silverstone. He does in this universe. Jenson Button got a podium at his home race. It's the Silverstone pole sitter, it's him race in Nice at the Hockenheim ring for the German Grand Prix, but it isn't Sebastian Vettel in pole position. Valtteri Bottas takes the pole instead after being on a bit of a tear the last couple of races. He takes pole position this time out, and after a bit of a messy first corner to the race that sees his teammate retire, Valtteri Bottas goes on to take the race victory this time out, ahead of Sebastian Vettel, who does finish on the podium, which will delight the German fans there to cheer on their home hero. Well, Fernando Alonso, again, ever up there, he's still, of course Fernando Alonso is going to be involved in this championship fight. Of course he's going to be up there. It's Ferrari era Fernando Alonso. And finally, the final round before the summer break is the Hungarian Grand Prix. Normally, that's the last round before the summer break. Sebastian Vettel ends up taking the pole position this time out. He's, the last couple of races, seriously, the last few races, pole, no pole, and now pole. It's a bit of a pattern, I'm noticing. But like the last time he was on pole, it does not even turn into a podium for him. He finishes down in 5th place, behind his future teammate Kimi Raikkonen, who scores his best finish of the season in 4th place. The race win, of course, this afternoon in real life, it went to Daniel Ricciardo ahead of Fernando Alonso in 2nd, and that is still the 1-2 this time. Daniel Ricciardo getting back on the top step of the podium for the first time since Canada ahead of Fernando Alonso, and then Felipe Massa gets only his 2nd podium of the season. And now, while all the drivers go off to find some sun somewhere for a few weeks, we'll take a look at the drivers and constructors standings. Daniel Ricciardo, after going on a bit of a tear the last few rounds, he is finding himself leading the championship on 174 points, but he's not completely alone up there, because just 12 points behind him is Fernando Alonso in 2nd place. Like I said, of course Fernando frickin' Alonso's going to be involved in this championship fight. As I said, it's Ferrari era Fernando Alonso. Of course he's going to be there. But seriously, I'm the one who was working all of this out. I'm the one making this video. And I am still questioning how the bloody hell is Alonso up there, given he's won 1 race and Ricciardo's won 4. I suppose it just shows that Ricciardo hasn't been bloody consistent. But it shows that so is Fernando. Anyway, Valtteri Bottas is sitting in 3rd place on 144 points, rounding off the top 3. While in 4th place, you'll find the reigning champion Sebastian Vettel. He's quite a ways behind his teammate, almost 50, just under 50 points behind him. And then the top 5 is currently being rounded off by Nico Hülkenberg on 105 points. The first driver not yet broken the 100-point gap is Jenson Button in 6th place on 90 points, while 7th is where you'll find Kevin Magnussen, his teammate, on 65 points. 8th place is Hülkenberg's teammate Sergio Perez on 57 points, while in 9th is sitting Felipe Massa on 53 points. And the top 10 is being rounded off by Kimi Raikkonen, just 1 point behind Massa on 52. In the constructors, Red Bull have quite a bit of a lead there on 302 points to Ferrari's 214. Ferrari really more have to worry about Williams, who are not that far behind them on 197. It's quite close in the battle for 4th between Force India and McLaren. Force India sitting on 162 points to McLaren's 155. And then it's the rest of the field, the bottom 5 teams. It's quite a gulf between the top 5 teams and the bottom 5 teams in this universe. I'm going to be honest, not too dissimilar to 2024. But Toro Rosso sit in 6th on 39 points, while Lotus are in 7th on 21 points. And then you have 6 points for Marussia, 3 points for Sauber in 9th, and then 2 points for Caterham. All 10 teams have scored points. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and you haven't done so already, then why not subscribe for more? This is a list of all the videos like this I've done so far. I've done quite a few. There's a bunch of other content on my channel. Stick around for more Formula 1 content, maybe now and again a bit of other motorsport content, but it's mainly Formula 1. Drop a like if you're enjoying it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'm always up for suggestions on more years. I do have plans for some of the Red Bull domination years in the early 2010s. I might be circling back around to 2017 next, because I think I might have something there. But anyway, let's return from the summer break. And now as everybody returns from the summer break, it's off to the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, one of the most loved circuits on the calendar. And this time out, it is Sebastian Vettel that we see taking pole position, as he did last time out in Hungary. He's been quite good at qualifying this year. He's taken quite a few pole positions. However, like his last pole, it isn't even converted into a podium. Vettel ends up finishing down in P4. It was, of course, Daniel Ricciardo who won this race in real life. He still wins it here, much like with Hungary and Canada. He won those races in real life. He still wins them here, even when he takes Mercedes out. But Daniel Ricciardo is further extending his championship lead ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who finished up in 2nd place. And it's Kimi Raikkonen, who does quite like this circuit. The Finn is getting his first podium of the season. His first, and I'm going to be honest, only podium of the season. This race also sees Andre Lotterer step in at Caterham, but he retires from the race, and it sees Marussia enter Alexander Rossi, but then they withdrew him anyway and kept Max Chilton in the car. And now it's off to Monza for the Italian Grand Prix. We saw Ferrari on the podium in Belgium. The Tifosi will be hoping for the same this time out, but we'll have to see what happens. At the start of the weekend anyway, then it's advantage Williams as Valtteri Bottas ends up taking pole position for the Grand Prix, but it's not turned into a race when he's going to have to settle for 2nd place for the 2nd time in a row. Instead, it is a former Ferrari driver who takes the race victory and the fastest lap, Felipe Massa, getting his first victory of the season. Finally, he's finishing ahead of his teammates, and then Daniel Ricciardo is finishing up in 3rd place, still on the podium, but losing a tiny bit of ground to his rivals. But crucially, he's been finishing ahead of the man who, when we last checked him with standings, was his main challenger, who was Fernando Alonso. It's back over to Asia next for the 14th round of the championship, the Singapore Grand Prix. Personally, one of my my favorite races on the calendar because I absolutely love the circuit. I like street tracks and I like night races. Singapore is both. Come on. The last time we saw Daniel Ricciardo taking pole position was on the streets of Monte Carlo, and he's back on pole position for the first time since then here on the streets of Singapore. However, he has to settle for second place at come race day. It's his teammate Sebastian Vettel, a man who, the most successful driver at the Singapore Grand Prix. I've done a video on that, actually. I will link it somewhere, and if I forget to, it's on my channel. Go watch it. Very subtle plug, I know. But Vettel ends up taking his first race win since Malaysia back at the start of the season. Might Red Bull have swapped the cars around? They might have, they might have not. But it's Vettel we're on about, and he has been known for ignoring team orders. But Vettel wins ahead of Daniel Ricciardo in second place for a Red Bull 1-2 finish, and then it's Fernando Alonso returning to the podium for the first time since Hungary. For the 15th round, it's off to Japan for the Japanese Grand Prix, a race weekend in 2014 that no matter how long you've been a Formula 1 fan, whether you're a newer fan or a longer term fan, I think we all know what happened that weekend. So we're not going to spend overly long here. It ends up being Valtteri Bottas taking pole position, but when the red flag ends up flying, he's classified down in P4. Not even a podium for him. It's instead Sebastian Vettel taking his second consecutive win. Japan is the track he goes very, very well at, and he does this time. He takes the victory in the treacherous conditions out there ahead of his teammate for a second consecutive Red Bull 1-2, and then Jenson Button rounds up the podium in third, returning to the podium for the first time since Silverstone. But while we're speaking about Suzuka 2014, can I just take a moment to appreciate Charles Leclerc's helmet this weekend? I'm sorry, it's a known fact on this channel that Leclerc is my favorite driver. It is no secret on this channel, but that helmet is absolutely lovely. Of course, him and Bianchi were quite close, so it's kind of fitting that he would do a Bianchi tribute helmet, kind of the design that Bianchi did run back when he was racing, and this helmet is absolutely lovely. I just had to mention it. But now let's have a look at the Drivers' Championship standings and seeing how all that's shaping up. Daniel Ricciardo still leads the standings on 250 points, and he's opened up quite a bit of a gap now. To now Sebastian Vettel, who's jumped up into second place, but he's quite a ways back on 202 points. 48 points is the gap as there's a helicopter going overhead. It's a big gap, but bear in mind the last race is double points. For whatever frickin' reason. So he could pull it back. Valtteri Bottas is currently in third place on 193 points, rounding off the top three, while Fernando Alonso has found himself slipping backwards to fourth place. From second, the last time we checked in on the standings, to now slipping backwards to fourth. He's been having a bit of a rocky time the last few rounds. He is on 195 points, while Jenson Button rounds off the top five after he had quite a few strong races there on 123 points. He's only 3 points clear of Nico Hülkenberg in sixth place on 120 points, while Felipe Massa is on around 100 points in 7th place. 8th place is where you're going to find Sergio Perez hanging out on 85 points. He's 5 points ahead of Kimi Raikkonen on 80 points, and then Kevin Magnussen rounds off the top 10 on 71 points. Meanwhile, in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull are still leading the way as they have been all season. They're going virtually unchallenged in the Constructors. They're gonna win the Constructors. It's just a matter of races now until they win it. They have quite a big gap back to Williams now in second place. They've moved up into second ahead of Ferrari on 293 points, 452 for Red Bull, while Ferrari's set on 265 currently, rounding off the top three. It's a 60-point gap further back from that to Force India in fourth place on 205 points, while they have an 11-point buffer to McLaren on 194 points in fifth place. Sixth place is still Toro Rosso on 64 points, while Lotus are still in seventh, still on 21 points. They have not scored a damn thing in the last few rounds. 21 points for them, while it's still the same points for the bottom three teams. Marussia on 6, 3 points are going the way of Sauber, and 2 on for Caterham. And now for the first time ever, let's head on over to Russia for the Russian Grand Prix at the Sochi Autodrome. This is the first time that race was ever held, and this is a track that the Valtteri Bottas would go on to go quite nicely round. He went very, very well. There was something about Sochi that just seemed to click with him, and it clicks with him here at the very first race in Sochi, as it's a hat trick for him of pole position, fastest lap, and race win. Yeah, like I said, Bottas goes very, very well around here. He's winning the race ahead of Jenson Button in second place, and then Kevin Magnussen returns to the podium for the first time since the opening round of the season. It's a McLaren 2-3 finish here. While further down the grid, Marussia did once again enter Alexander Rossi, but then they withdrew him from the weekend and just ran one car as a mark of respect for Jules Bianchi. And now it's a hop, skip, and a jump across the pond to Austin, Texas for the United States Grand Prix. Red Bull can win the Constructors' Championship this time out if they have a big enough gap to Williams in second place. With 129 points left available for the Constructors' Championship after this race, they just have to have a bigger gap than that after this race to win the Constructors, really. And Williams are having a good start in trying to prevent Red Bull from winning the Constructors as Valtteri Bottas takes his third consecutive pole position. So he's doing his utmost to try and prevent Red Bull from winning the championship. But come race day, Red Bull get the better of him as Daniel Ricciardo surges to his first race victory since the Belgian Grand Prix, returning to the top step of the podium. And that plus Sebastian Vettel's 5th place finish is enough for Red Bull to become Constructors' champions for the 5th consecutive year. Williams are going to have to settle for trying to stay ahead of Ferrari. But it is still a podium finish for Valtteri Bottas as he finishes in 3rd place behind his teammate Felipe Massa for a Williams 2-3 finish. It's time to head on over to the penultimate round of the season for the Brazilian Grand Prix. Again, another track, Sao Paulo. It's loved by many. It's loved by quite a few, and it's a track that's seen many dramatic moments over the years. And it can see another dramatic moment once again this year because Daniel Ricciardo could wrap up the Drivers' Championship this weekend. With the gap currently sitting at 52 points to Valtteri Bottas in 2nd place, he could win it if he keeps the gap at over 50 points because of course double points for the final race, 50 points available for the win in Abu Dhabi. That's how it goes. But it ends up being Felipe Massa who ends up taking pole position in qualifying in front of his home crowd. That would absolutely delight the Brazilian fans. They will be absolutely loving that. They'll be absolutely loving it come race day because the Brazilian ends up going on to take the race victory in front of his home crowd, his 2nd win of the season and 2nd consecutive podium as he was on the podium last time out at the USA. His teammate Valtteri Bottas ends up finishing down in 8th place, but all is not lost because Daniel Ricciardo ends up retiring from the race, which that means that Daniel Ricciardo did not win the championship this time out. He's gonna have to wait till the final round of the season, but the podium is being rounded off by Jenson Button on the podium in 2nd place, and then Sebastian Vettel is finishing up in 3rd place. But yes, the championship is not yet secured. Daniel Ricciardo is currently sitting on 285 points, while Bottas is on 237. It's a 48-point gap. Ricciardo has basically won it, but there is still a slim possibility that Bottas could overhaul him for the championship. But Bottas is more going to be keeping an eye on those behind him because he does not have a very big gap behind him. Sebastian Vettel is only 2 points behind him on 235 points, while Fernando Alonso is a further 14 back from that on 221. All is still to play for in the battle for 2nd place. That's the real battle to keep an eye on here. There's also a bit of a battle ongoing for 5th place between Jenson Button and Felipe Massa. Nico Hülkenberg is kind of in that battle as well, but it will be difficult for him to overhaul it. But Button currently on 160 points to Massa's 145, and then Hülkenberg on 129 there, currently sitting in 7th place. And then at the bottom end of the top 10, there's a very interesting battle going on for 8th, 9th, and 10th between Perez, Magnussen, and Raikkonen. Magnussen is currently leading that battle on 100 points, while Raikkonen is in that battle on 96 points, and then Perez is sitting on 89. So we'll have to keep an eye on that battle as well. And then there's the rest of the grid. Constructors' Championship, well, Red Bull have already won it. They're sealed and secured there on 520 points, but Williams are not yet secure in 2nd place. They're on 382 points to Ferrari's 317. Would be difficult for Ferrari to overhaul it, I'm going to be honest, but not it's still mathematically possible. McLaren are in 4th on 260 points, while Force India are on 218 points. Again, they're not clear given there is 86 points available for a constructor to score at the final race. So we'll see what happens if Force India can somehow overhaul McLaren there, but we'll see. Toro Rosso are on 70 points, Lotus are on 13, and then it's the same points for the bottom 3 as it's been for a while. And now let's head on into that final round of the season, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Double points, again, for whatever bloody reason. Valtteri Bottas is going to have to do absolutely everything to 1, try and hold on to 2nd place, and 2, potentially try and see if he can get lucky, win the race, and hope Ricciardo DNFs or something. Because to win the championship, Bottas will need to win the race and hope Ricciardo fails to score. Because if they tie on points, then Ricciardo will win the championship on countback, I believe. And Bottas is a good start. He ends up taking pole position for the Grand Prix. A Grand Prix that sees Williams being quite strong. However, the Williams winning the race would not be Valtteri Bottas. It would be Felipe Massa, while Bottas has to settle for 2nd place. There is every chance that Williams might have actually swapped the cars around, but given, well, in real life, then Bottas was finishing, about 25 seconds behind Massa? Maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't have. This is just what I'm running with. Massa wins the Grand Prix ahead of Valtteri Bottas. It wouldn't have made much difference whatever they did, because Daniel Ricciardo's P3 finish is enough for him to secure the championship. Red Bull still winning championships. You take Mercedes out of it, it's Red Bull. They're on their 5th 5th consecutive year of winning them both. Daniel Ricciardo is your world champion. But speaking of Massa, in the Massa Button battle, then it ends up being Massa coming out on top with that race win. Those 50 points help him overhaul Button, who finishes down in 4th place. And it kind of goes without saying that Valtteri Bottas' 2nd place finish is enough for him to stay ahead of Vettel and keep 2nd place in the championship, and Vettel's 7th place finish is enough for him to stay ahead of Fernando Alonso and keep P3. And then in the Perez, Magnus and Raikkonen battle, Sergio Perez finishing up in 6th place, he managed to jump the pair of them. From being last in that battle, he was 10th heading into this race, he's managed to jump ahead of both of them with that 6th place finish he got, while Magnussen's 10th place finish ended up allowing him to just haul ahead of Kimi Raikkonen, who has the salver of finishing in, well, 3rd in that battle. Now let's take a look at how these standings all worked out this season. Daniel Ricciardo is your champion. He's world champion of 2014 without Mercedes on 315 points. He's ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who has the salver 2nd place here. In his 2nd season of Formula 1, he is finishing up on 273 points. Sebastian Vettel and the other Red Bull car round off the top 3 on 246 points. His run of titles has come to an end. Fernando Alonso is in 4th place on 229 points, and in the battle for 5th place, it's Felipe Massa coming out on top after the race win at the final race, gave him a total of 195 points for the season, ahead of Button in P6 on 184, while Nico Hülkenberg gets himself for 7th place on 149 points. His teammate Sergio Perez is behind him on 105 points. He finishes up just 3 points ahead of Kevin Magnussen on 102 points, while Kimi Raikkonen rounds off the top 10 on around 100 points. Jean-Eric Vergne is the first driver outside the top 10 on 42 points. He's ahead of his teammate Danny Kvyat, who is finishing up on 28 points. Romain Grosjean is the lead Lotus on the grid, in the standings rather, on 21 points, while his teammate Pastor Maldonado manages just 9 points this season. Jules Bianchi managed to score Mauritius' first ever points in Formula 1 back in Monaco, and he finishes up on 6 points, 3 ahead of Adrian Sutil, who is the only Sauber to score points with 3 points, but Marcus Ericsson is the last of the point scorers on 2 points, because Esteban Gutierrez, Max Chilton, Kamui Kobayashi and Will Stevens all scored absolutely nothing. Will Stevens coming in at just the final race of the season, where Caterham came back for one race after leaving a little bit earlier this season. It was before Coulter they left, and then of course Lauterer and Rossi were not classified because Lauterer retired and then Rossi withdrew from both races he was entered into. In the Constructors' Championship, this is how it shaped out. Red Bull are Constructors' Champion for the 5th consecutive year on 561 points. They finish in 1st ahead of Williams, who round off in 2nd place on 475 points. They managed to stay ahead of Ferrari, who end up in 3rd on 329 points. McLaren managed to stay ahead of Force India on 286 points, while Force India end up rounding off the top 5 on 254 points. And then the bottom 5 teams, Toro Rosso are in 6th place on 70 points. They're ahead of Lotus, who scored just 30 points this season, finishing up in 7th place. And then we have Marussia, who are still on 6 points, Sauber, who are on 2 points in 9th, and then Caterham are in 10th, also known as last, on 2 points. And with that, 2014 without Mercedes is at its end. That's what would have happened. The Red Bull streak ends up continuing without Mercedes. That's what happens. Daniel Ricciardo, in his first season with Red Bull, wins the championship. Red Bull win the Constructors. Up next, as I said, I think I have some for 2017, so I think that's where we're gonna go next. We're gonna backtrack to 2017, and then we're gonna get into some of the Red Bull domination years in the early 2010s. But that's for another day. For now, let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.